Why don't you just mind your own business?
Can you please mind your own business?
Hey, can you please mind your own business?
Mind your own business, no?
Mind your own business.
Can you please mind your own business?
Hoy, mind your own business, no?
Please mind your own business.
Can you please mind your own business?
We now return to Mind Your Own Business on DZRJ 810 AM, the voice of the Philippines. Here are your hosts, Nicole Jacinto and Nikki De Vega.
Okay, welcome back, folks. I pressed the wrong microphone and I was talking and you couldn't hear me. Anyway, Nikki De Vega is not with us today. She's on a business trip, but she has sent Attorney Carlo Marquez. And I am still Nicole Jacinto. And welcome back to Mind Your Own Business, where we're helping you figure out how to mind your own business. And as I said earlier, Attorney Carlo Marquez is here to talk about trial and litigation. Now, just to kind of recap what we talked about earlier, I was just saying that the attorney Carlos' notion of lawyering was different before he actually entered and started practicing the law. And for a lot of us business practitioners out there, or entrepreneurs, it's different. In school is different from actual work life, but you can learn things, right? You definitely learn things that you use, right, Carlo?
Yeah.
But also for those entrepreneurs who are single-minded in their vision of getting their product or whatever their idea is out there, you'll find that you will come across some roadblocks or challenges, and sometimes you also have to adjust your attitude towards it, because although you're thinking very, very, you can still do things by force of will, but you have to remember that you're living with other people and dealing with them. And sometimes in all of this dealing, we come across litigation, trial and litigation, when contracts are not honored or obligations are not honored performed as Attorney Carlo Marquez puts it. Okay, so let's start first with the notion of trial and litigation. I'll give you the floor. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, the usual notion when you speak of trial and litigation is that it usually occurs before regular court. But actually, that's not true, because trial and litigation can also occur in government agencies. We have government agencies who have quasi-judicial powers, meaning they can adjudicate cases or issues placed before them by the party litigants. Now, that's the common misconception, because in those cases you also have the trial proper, and they also follow their own rules of procedure.
Okay, so let me just ask you here. There can be which government agencies, for example, can try cases in a way?
Try cases. Like one example would be the PRC, Professional Regulation Commission.
Okay.
They can adjudicate if, for example, you have a complaint against a professional who is licensed with the PRC. You can file a complaint before that government body, and then after that, the filing of that complaint, there would usually be a trial procedure as well.
Okay,
Similar to the courts, you have actually have their hearing officer who acts as a judge, and then you have the usual stenographer.
And this happens in the PRC.
Yes.
And in their jurisdiction. And
Yes.
this is also considered trial and litigation.
That would be considered as trial and litigation, because that would involve the trial proper, the procedures that would usually occur whenever there is a court case. So there. But the difference between that and the cases filed before the courts would be in the PRC, what you are actually complaining about is the violation of the individual for their code of ethics, for example. So
Yes.
the bottom line would be revocation of license or a disciplinary measure being enforced against the particular professional.
So actually, the PRC has a show here on Tuesdays. Actually, tomorrow they'll have a show at 11 a.m. to 12 noon. So I invite you listeners out there also to listen to that. That's very interesting and very important. And they cover 48 professions, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, if they're listening to me now, they might kill me if I get the number wrong. But I'm glad you brought that up, because, for example, as you're saying, let's say you get involved in a business and the person is licensed by the PRC. Let's say it's an engineer.
Yes.
Or an architect. Oh, let's say an engineer. Let's just stick to one. Here I go again. Two people at the same time. So if you have a complaint against that engineer, because let's say you're involved in construction, or even if you're not, let's say they put up your business or your store or something, and it just totally fell, and you found out that it was because of it was their fault, or because they didn't comply with certain safety measures, then you can try them. Can you sue them also criminally? That's my first question. You can,
because you have different cause of action for those.
but then you can also go to the PRC. One step would be to go to the PRC and complain so that their license is revoked.
Yes.
Or let's say a doctor who performs like some kind of weird surgery that they're not licensed to perform, and then they leave an instrument inside your, let's say they leave a scalpel in your stomach or something like that. Okay, so those things are considered also trial and litigation. Now, how about the when it gets to the criminal court or civil? You were saying you can file a civil or criminal case, and this is tried in our regular courts.
Yes. Well, the procedure would be different if you will initiate a civil action or a criminal action. For a criminal action, it would have to go through the prosecutor's office.
Okay.
So you file a complaint before the prosecutor. The city where the office of the city prosecutor wherein the crime was committed.
Okay.
So in that case, you file a complaint, and then the prosecutor will set a hearing. He will give the opposing party time to file their counter affidavit, and then after that, you'll have a reply, and they will file their rejoinder. And then after the whole procedure before the office of the city prosecutor, the prosecutor will decide on whether or not to file the case with the courts. Now, in determining whether or not it should be filed before the courts, the fiscal or the city prosecutor would determine if there was probable cause that a crime was committed.
I was just gonna ask you there, and you actually said it. The prosecutor is also known here as the fiscal, right?
Yes.
Okay, so those two terms that's the same person, because some people are familiar with fiscal, some are familiar with prosecutor.
But actually, they prefer to be called prosecutors.
They prefer to be called prosecutors.
Fiscal would have a different connotation. Because
is it an older term? Fiscal?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it is an older term, but most prosecutors are trying to correct it now. They prefer to be called prosecutors instead of fiscal. But sometimes you really can't avoid, because
you hear it.
Yes.
Even when you're there, no, in let's say City Hall or whatever, the court, you hear, oh, fiscal, ganyan. Somebody's referring to them as fiscal.
And it's a bit unusual to call them as, where's the prosecutor?
Yeah, where's the
Or
prosecutor?
usually it's where's the fiscal.
Where's the fiscal?
Yeah.
That's right. Okay, so it's up to the prosecutor or fiscal/fiscal to find probable cause if you file a criminal action. So, for example, you wanted to sue this engineer or something, it's up to them to find
Probable cause.
And I just
probable cause would be it would be what a reasonable mind would want to, or would think that there is a crime that was committed. So it's not usually in all criminal actions, the degree of evidence that is required is proof beyond reasonable doubt.
Okay.
But in the level of the prosecutor, all that is needed is probable cause. They should be convinced that, or there is a chance that a crime was indeed committed. So you don't have to prove beyond reasonable doubt that there was a crime committed. So that's the difference between criminal action before the regular courts and one that is at the level of the prosecutor.
Yeah, okay. So just to point out, you don't have to like go there with all this
Evidence,
proof and
yes.
evidence right away, no? Because they just have to, for probable cause, it's what you were saying earlier, you mentioned what a reasonable mind might think. So they just have to be convinced that there is a chance that a crime was committed, and then it goes to trial. And then that's where the
Procedure,
whole procedure starts and takes off. Okay. Can I ask you, what is an example? Because this happens in business. You come across. Let's go back to civil cases first. You can file civil cases against people for breach of contract as well.
That would be civil action. So, unlike in criminal cases, you file a civil complaint before the court.
Okay.
So, well, you just have to prepare for the filing fees. I think that would be one consideration which our viewers or our listeners are actually interested in as well.
Yes.
Because in criminal cases, the usual fee would be 50 pesos or 200 depending on which city in which city prosecutor you're filing your case. But when you talk of civil action, it would depend on the actual amount that you're praying for in your complaint. So it would be dependent on the actual damages, for example, that you're claiming to have occurred. Well, of course, in the criminal action, there would be exceptions. Like, for example, BP 22, it would depend on the amount of the checks that were issued. So there. But the general rule is that in criminal actions, it would not be based on a particular amount. So usually they have that fixed amount of 50 pesos or 200 depending. So it would not be a big amount.
Okay, you mentioned something BP 22. So that is a criminal.
Yes.
That's automatically a criminal
Yes.
case, and that is the case of bouncing checks.
Yes, bouncing checks.
Of course, I remember we talked about that once.
Yes.
Okay, so actually, you know what? Let's go to talk. Just remind the listeners about how to file cases in terms of BP 22 or when they have cause to do so, and that's a criminal action. Then we'll go to maybe an example of a civil action. Right when we get back from this break, we're just going to take a short break to do the VOA news. If you have any questions or would like to make any comments, call us up at 897-8374, 895-4460. We'll be right back. Attorney Carlo Marquez is with me today. This is Nicole Jacinto, and you're tuned in to Mind Your Own Business right here on DZRJ 810 AM, the voice of the Philippines.